Welcome back to our series, Can You Spare Some Change? Again. Hallelujah. So we're going to pick up from where we left off yesterday. We were talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls and the significance of them. And, today, I want to try to answer the question, just what is Scripture anyway? Just what is Scripture? If we look it up in the average dictionary, it's defined as sacred writings. But it must be understood that in a nutshell, Scripture is simply the origin and history and future of the nation of Israel. If you really think about it at its core, this is what Scripture is. It is the history and future of the nation of Israel. So all this history that we've been going through concerning Israel, concerning the house of Yahudah, this is just as much a part of Scripture as what we read in our Bibles, because that's really what Scripture is. It's just the family line of Israel, its origin and its future. And so once you understand that, you begin to see things a little differently. Secondly, it should be understood that it was the Hellenized sages, i.e. the Pharisees, who that even crucified our Messiah, who ultimately prevailed in shaping, or should I say misshaping, the historical memory of the Yahudim which exists today. Their historical view went unchallenged, even though things didn't always line up, such as why they keep a stationary Sabbath, on day 7, and they'll keep a stationary Sabbath on day 7 on a basis diverse from all the other Moedim, which are determined by observance of the moon. So the weekly Shabbat is, with them, it's not reckoned off of the observance of the moon. Yet all the other Moedim are. Now for me, this is one of the main things that led to the lunar Sabbath, because I know that Yah changes not. And I know that, from studying Scripture for a couple decades at this point, that he does the same things over and over. You see the same patterns. You just constantly reoccurring. And so I just couldn't accept that, the weekly Shabbat would be on one basis, and the other Moedim, whereas the Shabbat is called a Moedim and the other Moedim are called Shabbats, and I can't see how one would be on one according to one basis and the other would be according to another. And I'm a sensible guy. I'm very analytical. Things have to make sense to me, and that just did not make sense, and it did not align, with the patterns that I found in Scripture. And so that's what led me to the lunar Sabbath to begin with. So now another thing that didn't line up is why they stopped keeping the new moon feast when the command is expressly stated in Scripture. It's there. Or could it have been to hide the fact that the new month, which has always day 1, could it be to hide the fact that sometimes it will fall on day 7? So that made me look at things too. Or why there's no date given for Shavuot. That's another thing that's perplexing. Or for that matter, why isn't there first fruit offerings for the other crucial crops that's associated with the worship of Yah that we see throughout Scripture, such as the grape harvest and the olive harvest. You know, we know it played an essential role in their society. You know, and Yah said to bring first fruits. First fruits seemed like it would mean first fruits of all your fruits. Mm-hmm. You know, now the olives and the grapes were considered as fruits, and they were an integral part of the worship of Yah. The olives were needed to make the light for the temple. You know, and the grapes was needed to make the wine for the oblations. You know, so it just, you know, didn't make sense. You know, now there's plenty of info and clarity to be found via these so-called non-canonized books that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls and sacred writings, as well as their sacred writings, their literature that the Pharisees have deemed taboo for us to look at. You know, because they weren't a part of their canon. But what is a canon anyway? And should we allow this so-called canon to restrict us from these writings that was once considered scripture by the priestly house of Zadok that Yah put in place to teach us? You know, so that being said, let us consider what a canon is. You know, some folks may not even be familiar with the word canon. The definition of a canon, it comes from the Hebrew word kaneh and the Greek word canon. Both signify a reed or measuring stick. You know, and so that's what a canon is. It's a reed or a measuring stick. Now, Rabbi Akiva, you know, now Rabbi Akiva is one of the old rabbis. He's actually was considered the chief of the rabbis, and he's one of the main guys that's responsible for the canonization, you know, as well as many of the things that you read in the Mishnah and the Talmud. Okay, so he's quoted as saying, "These are the appointed times of the Adonai, holy convocations which ye shall proclaim, whether at their proper time or not at their proper time. I have no appointed time, says these." This is from the Mishnah. Okay. Now notice I have, you know, a few dots after proclaim. That's because he was quoting from Leviticus 23:4, but he left out a very significant aspect of the verse. So we're going to go to Leviticus 23:4 and see what he left out. Leviticus 23:4 teaches us, it says, "These are the feast of Yahuwah, even holy convocations, which he shall proclaim," and this is where he stopped, but what he cut off was "in their seasons." Now, why is this significant? You know, because this word seasons is moedim. It's number 4150, and when you look it up, it properly speaks to an appointment. You know, but quite literally, it is a fixed time or season. Emphasis on fixed. Now, according to some authorities, Rabbi Akiva made the inference from the defective spelling of the Hebrew word atam, you know, which is normally translated them. Now, referring to the set or appointed times, which could also be read as atem, you, this is the gist of what you call a bararita, a traditional Jewish interpretation or teaching of biblical law from the Tanaitic period, you know, i.e. the period of the Talmudic rabbis. Now, he continued on to say that the text says you 3 times, you know, where the word atam, or which is usually translated them, is used. Okay, these are the 3 times: Leviticus 22:31, Leviticus 23:2, and Leviticus 23:4. Leviticus 22:31 says, "Therefore shall ye keep my commandments and do them. I am Yahuwah." So this word "them" here is a time. Now, also Leviticus 23:2, "Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feast of Yahuwah, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are my feasts. And lastly, Leviticus 23:4, these are the feasts of Yahuwah, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. Okay, so these three places is where he's saying that it can be also be translated as you. So therefore, ye should keep my commandments and do you them, or do you, I am Yahuwah. Or speak unto the children of Israel and say unto yourself concerning, because if it's supposed to be you, say unto you concerning the feast of Yahuwah, which ye shall proclaim, the holy convocations, even these are my feasts, and these are my feasts of Yahuwah, even holy convocations, which shall proclaim you in you seasons. So this is the way that he's saying that it can be interpreted. Now, he says that you may set the appointed times, even if you err inadvertently. You, even if you err deliberately. You, even if you are misled. This is in the Mishnah. I'm not making this stuff up. The word them is written ultima in a particular full spelling in the temple scroll. The va and the hey is there, which excludes the possibility of reading atem as you. And this we can see this in the temple scroll. You know, see, but we would have never had anything to compare it to prior to this. And so, you know, only thing we had to go on is what they told us. But you see how they are interpreting this. Another example of this is offered in the halakhic midrash Sifra, where it's quoted, if you, again, proclaim them, they are my set times. If not, they are not my set times. So in other words, there are no appointed times, no more deemed other than those announced and celebrated by the sages of the court, regardless of whether they have been set for the proper time. There are many indications that this unlawful priesthood may have. There are many indications also that this unlawful priesthood may have edited biblical works to conceal their affinity with the solar calendar. You know, so you see the type of stuff that they do. You know, now we're going to take a look at some of these indications that kind of speak to they may have messed around with the biblical works to conceal their affinity with the solar calendar. This is a list of 9 of them. Number 1, the differences between the story of the flood, which refers to a year, you know, where they speak of it as 354 plus 10 days, and the Zadokite parallels, which speak of it as a 364 days, you know, which speaks to the solar calendars. So you see how they put it 354 because that speaks to a lunar calendar, and then they said plus 10 days. Differences between the tradition of Enoch's birth in Genesis 4 and 5 and a parallel account in Jubilees. You know, now in this account, Enoch's birth in Jubilees tells you about how not only was he the 7th from heaven, but also about how he was taken up and Yah had given him the understanding of the calendar. Yeah. You know, so it goes into detail about this, you know. But all we get in Masoretic text is, you know, he was the 7th from heaven, and, you know, and he was taken. And his years was 365 years. You know, he lived 65 years, walked with Elohim, he was taken, and then, you know, it's a very short excerpt. Let's put it like that. Okay. And number 3, analysis of the ambiguous dates in Ezekiel based on the Matanic calculation, which associates them with Shavuot. You know, so, you know, that's another thing. Number 4, the fact that biblical tradition never explicitly specifies the number of days or weeks in a year. Now, doesn't it seem strange that out of 66 books that's not there? Yeah. Number 5, the lack of a date for the theophany as Sinai. Now, this has always bugged me, you know, but it just, you know, he gives a date for, you know, he says 3 times to appear for him, and he gives a date for 2 of them, but he leaves a date out out for one, that don't make sense. You know, that's not the way he does things. You know, number 6, discrepancies between the text of certain psalms and the versions found at Qumran. You know, when you look at some of the psalms from the Qumran text, you see that certain things associated with the calendar is left out. You know, and also, you know, that's even true in some of the other ancient writings that's of the scriptures that's around. You know, number 7, the rejection of the psalms in praise of the sons of Zadok, of Ben Sirah 51, and other psalms found at Qumran. Some of them, there was a whole slew of psalms they just chose not to include at all, such as, you know, there was a psalm for every day of the year, 364 psalms, that one that was supposed to be sang for every day of the year. There were Sabbath psalms. You know, there was psalms of the Sabbath sacrifice that, you know, that was supposed to be sang, that they sang in place of actually sacrificing animals. They would sing these psalms. That would be the sacrifice. You know, but because that would have revealed, you know, that the solar calendar was the true calendar, you know, they got they were non-canonized. You know, number 8, the highly abbreviated version of the story of the Watchers in Genesis in comparison with the much fuller accounts in Enoch and Jubilees. You know, speaking about, you know, when the sons of Elohim came and got with the daughters of men, you know. Well, when you look at Jubilees and Enoch, you see a much fuller account of the story. You know, number 9, out of 13 dates of prophecies by Ezekiel, 7 appear in different form in the Septuagint, and these inconsistencies are believed to be deliberate revisions done in order to introduce lunar calendar dates that were different than the solar calendar dates that had appeared in earlier versions. In fact, Ezekiel almost didn't even make the cut of canonization at all. You know, they were really going on the fence about even allowing that to be canonized. But praise Yah, someone fought for it and it made the cut. In view of these probable modifications in what ultimately became today's canonized version of Scripture, it is not surprising that literature explicitly based upon the solar calendar was excluded from the canon. You know, don't take a rocket scientist to see how this could have came about. Now, on the other hand, the house of Zadok only recognized sacred writings and heavenly tablets. They believed that one was absolutely forbidden to add anything or to subtract anything from these writings. In their sacred written versions, which were the special charge of the priest, the earthly representatives of the angelic authority who had received them by dictation. You know, so, you know, they wasn't messing around with the word. Now, this concept is in contrast to the rabbinic tradition, which considered the sacred writings permanent and final, but open to discussion and interpretation based on human reason and imagination in the spirit of there are 70 aspects to Torah. You know, now, there are 70 aspects to Torah stems from Psalm 62:12, and it's glossed in the Talmud, you know, the way that they interpret it, you know, which teaches that one biblical verse can have pluralistic interpretations. That is, many different teachings, even if they contradict one another. This is what they believe. This is where we get our Bibles from. It's the Masoretic text, which was their authorized version. The right to add or eliminate, as in biblical times, was the exclusive province of the recipients of the divine revelation, prophets or visionaries, guardians of hallowed ritual traditions who could convey the apocalyptic meanings of their prophetic text. It was not granted to savants and scholars drawing on their human intelligence in the effort to adapt the divine law to changing human experience. See, and this is something that the rabbis were guilty of. You know, they always wanted to change it as times change. You know, well, Yah don't work like that. You know, Yah doesn't mold himself around what's going on in humanity. He expects humanity to mold themselves around what he said. Now, it's due to Rabbi Akiva and his cronies that we have the canonization of the Old Testament that exists today. And it's also why the Old Testament reads the way it does. You know, we have to understand this. We already done seen, you know, the type of things that this guy, you know, advocated. You know, and, you know, when you look at it, a lot of the stuff in the Talmud and Mishnah, it's just so far-fetched and so, you know, what they do to scriptures should be a crime. You know, and I don't encourage or you know, advocate that anyone even read it. You know, but if you want to, you know, that's up to you. But you know, Yahshua said, "Beware the leaven of the Pharisees." Keep that in mind. You know. Now, that's the reason. You know, they're the reason for the way that Scripture reads the way it does today. For it differs from the Greek and Aramaic versions of Scripture in hundreds of subtle but often significant ways. And you know, we have a Greek version, that's the Septuagint, and we have an Aramaic version, which are both ancient versions that predate the Masoretic text. You know, the Aramaic version is called the Peshitta. You know, and the Greek version is called the Septuagint. You know, and so when we compare them with the Masoretic text, we see hundreds of different subtle but often significant, you know, edits, if you would, you know, or redactions. Now, they are the reason that the Jews have a Pharisee calendar today, one which commences in the 7th month and is centered about lunar observations. And so, you know, we looked at this and we understood, you know, the wickedness of these people, and, you know, and we done our best to try to put things back, you know, and this is how we've come to where we are, you know, trying to do this, you know, trying to put things back, you know. And I must say, you know, that what we do is quite sensible, you know, but there's a way that seemeth right unto man, and the ways thereof lead unto death. You know, we have to do it the way Yah said do it. Now, for the first time in 2,000 years, we have actual proof of what Yahushua and his apostles viewed as scripture. And whether you hold to the writings belong to the Essenes, which are believed to have stemmed from Zadokite priests, or you believe, as I do, that they're the belongings of the actual Zadokite priests themselves, one thing is evident from the writings themselves, and that is that they was mandated that every group associated with them had to be headed up by a Zadokite priest. So thereby saying, you know, that, you know, whatever's there was approved by the Zadokite priest. You know, if not written directly by the Zadokite priest, which I truly believe. And even a lot of the people who initially thought that they were the Essenes, you know, they were basing that upon just the first few scrolls that were found. You know, after all these other scrolls started coming out, many of them retracted that statement. You know, because it's just obvious, because, you know, they refer to themselves as the house of Zadok. They refer to themselves as priests. They refer to themselves as sons of the covenant.
Right.
You know, all these writings that's dealing with the temple, no one would have, because they didn't know anyone else have a temple. You know, so, you know, this makes it very evident, you know, to me, you know, that during this time, you know, the time period in which it was found, and knowing the history that I've been sharing with you guys over the past few lessons, you know, knowing the history of how there was a war over the calendar issue, and how the proper priest, the proper temple priest, got ousted. You know, anyone who look at the evidence, I don't see how they can conclude anything different. But I'm sure somebody will find a way. So, either way you look at it, it should be clear to see that Yah has given us the answer to the calendar issue. And a new canon. That is a new measuring stick for what Scripture is. And it's called the house of Zadok. See, because the house of Zadok is who Yah said that we were to go to. The Dead Sea Scrolls are the very words of the house of Zadok. That's the priest that Elohim said to go to for our hard questions and our matters of controversy, such as the calendar issue. You know, with this in mind, consider the house of Zadok in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's just, what we have is the voice of the house of Zadok speaking from the grave. Just like we have the voice of the prophets and the saints and the rest of Scripture speaking from the grave, teaching us, leading us, guiding us.
Right.
These are the very people that Yah told us to go to, and here it is, only Yah. Only Yah. Their words get preserved for a time such as ours.
Right.
You got to be able to see through that. That's Yah. That's Yah. That's Yah. I don't know what else to say about it. And let's consider the Bible prophecy in the third temple.
Right.
Now, many of you who have read Bible prophecy, you know that much of the literature speaks about a third temple. There's a number of end-time prophecies that center about the temple of Elohim. So that directly and indirectly teaches us that there's a third temple coming. Now, it's actually detailed in the book of Ezekiel. Which is why Ezekiel is such an important book. Not to be left out. And that's probably why it didn't get left out. Well, let's take a look and see what it speaks of concerning this future temple and its priests.
Hallelujah.
Ezekiel 40:46. And the chamber whose prospect is toward the north is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, among the sons of Levi, which come near to Yahuwah to minister unto him. Ezekiel 43:19. And thou shalt give the priests, the Levites, that be of the seed of Zadok, which approach unto me to minister unto me, saith the Adonai Yahuwah, a young bullock for a sin offering. Ezekiel 44:15 and 16. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok that keep the charge of my sanctuary, when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to minister unto me. They shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Adonai Yahuwah. They shall enter into my sanctuary, and they shall come near to my table to minister unto me, and they shall keep my charge. Ezekiel 48:11. It shall be for the priests that are sanctified of the sons of Zadok, which have kept my charge, which went not astray, when the children of Israel went astray, as the Levites went astray. When all the other ones went astray on the calendar issue, the Zadokites are the ones that stood strong. In the face of a world empire, Rome, Onias III stood strong. He got incarcerated for it. Eventually he got murdered for it. But it's the sons of Zadok. They were the ones that was chosen. And, we can sensibly put things together and do what's right in our own heart if we want. But that's not going to be pleasing to Yah. So hereby through Ezekiel, we learn that not only were the Zadokite priests the priests of the first temple and a good portion of the second temple, but they're also going to be the priests of the third and final temple. Not to mention that they went not astray. So now, all we need to do is see what the priest has to say about the calendar issue. But before we do, I just want to thank Yah for answer prayer. You see, because I called a corporate fast and prayer for BYA concerning a word from Yah and the vision he's given me concerning the discipleship school. And what I felt him telling me, what he spoke to my heart was, you know, how you going to start a school you don't have it right yet? You know, so I'm trying to get it right. The Father directed me to come to him via his son, you know, the word. I did, and the word told me to go to the priest. I didn't ask which one. The word responded by saying the house of Zadok. I then asked, well, where are they today that I might ask them? The word responded by having the Ruach HaKodesh lead me to the newly translated calendrical Dead Scroll, which was just translated after his sign in the heavens, his great sign in the heavens. And now we know for the first time in 2,000 years, thanks to the Dead Sea Scrolls, how the house of Zadok, that is, the temple priest, kept the Creator's calendar.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Is this not an answer to prayer concerning the calendar? You know, the Creator does have a calendar. You know, and the Zadokites was entrusted with it. So who would be better to teach it to us than the Zadokites?
Hallelujah.
Time, as conceived by the Zadokite priests, literature in particular, the Temple Scroll, 4QMT, Songs of Sabbath Service, the Damascus Document, Blessings, the Psalm Scrolls, the calendars of priestly courses, and certain pseudepigraphic works such as Jubilees and 1st and 2nd Enoch was not an arbitrary man-made structure or human order, dependent on unstable observations and determinations influenced by external conditions and adjustments and errors. It was of divine origin, a cosmic pattern obeying preordained, immutable laws, a cycle that had been reoccurring since sacred time was imprinted upon nature during the 7 days of creation and consecrated through the Sabbath day. This is how they looked at time. Time was envisioned as the reflection of divine order in the universe, so designed as to perpetuate the cycle of life, blessing, and fertility, an order which time and space sanctified, independent from the earliest stages of creation, which took place in time divided into 7 days and in the space formed within these 7 days. Hallelujah. The calendar was not entrusted to man, subject to adjustment and change, dependent upon human calculations or terrestrial considerations, for it represented the concept of a profound, comprehensive reality, a divine reality beyond the reach of the senses, but reflected in the cyclic numerical harmony revealed in the passage and changes of time. The Zadokite priests teach that any infringement of the sacred cyclic pattern as expressed in the fixed numerical proportions of its component parts, any attempt to ignore the divine pattern based upon number and counting would generate impurity, bringing in its wake curse, death, and oblivion. The calendar of weeks and seasons, of Sabbaths and covenants with its eternal cyclic numerical pattern was taught to human beings via divine angelic revelation. This wasn't from man. The goal of this revelation, variously designated in Qumran literature as wondrous mysteries, the secret of your wonder, the mystery of your knowledge, was to reach the founders of the priestly dynasty, the proper order of heavenly cosmic time and its terrestrial counterpart in a cyclic priestly order reflected in liturgy that testified to the 7-base divine pattern of time and to its cyclic nature in terms of Sabbaths and festivals as well as cycles of life and fertility. Its 7 divisions of time are days, weeks, months, signs, seasons, Sabbath of years, and weeks of jubilees. The Zadokite priests regarded the calendar that governed the sacred temple services around the time of their succession, based on a lunar calendar of 354 days counted in months of unequal length, depending on human discretion, based on variable human observations of the new moon, as false and arbitrary, an infringement of the covenant, sinful and wicked. This is the way they looked at it. They had a synchronized calendar of Sabbaths divided into 4 equal quarters, seasons each consisting of 13 Sabbaths each, which provided for 7 festivals within a 7-month period, from Passover in the 1st month to of Aviv or Nisan to the Feast of Tabernacles in the 7th month. Within this 28-week period, there actually were 4 festivals of first fruits at intervals of 7 Sabbaths. They were always celebrated on day 1, that is a Sunday, and involved pilgrimage to the temple. They are detailed in the temple scroll and NMT 4Q349. You know, so knowing this, you know, now we can see where the tradition came from, that it always had to be on a Sunday. This ritual and liturgical calendar began its measurement from the 4th day of creation. The names of the 24 priestly courses corresponds to the number of hours in a day and designate the order of succession of weeks in the ritual and liturgical calendar, in which each of the 4 seasons is a cycle of 13 Sabbaths. Days of the week would also be specified with reference to the priestly courses on duty. For example, creation on the 4th day in Gomorrah. That is on the 4th day, i.e. Wednesday. The Zadokite priest calendar system was based on a solar calendar of 364 days plus an additional day placed at the end of the 12-month Adar, making for 365 days in total. You know, there are other variations, but this is the one that Yah led me to. This additional day was referred to as the day of the kingship of the Adonai. It is believed that it and the feast of Rosh Hashanah were celebrated together as a 2-day gathering. The 365 days consisted of 52 weeks, whose Sabbaths were counted in a fixed annual cycle, divided symmetrically among the 4 seasons and on a prescribed mathematical calculation of progress of the solar year. 12 30-day months with 5 further days added to differentiate the 4 seasons and 1 to close out the year. These 365 days were divided into 4 quarters or seasons, each of 13 weeks, which together constituted 52 Sabbaths. The calendar is said to have come from a divine origin and is enunciated in detail in 1st Enoch 72, 32, 74, 10 through 12, 75, 2, 82, 6, 2nd Enoch 13 through 17, and 41 through 8. Jubilees 6, 23 through 38, 4Q NMT, and the Psalm scroll, in addition to the principles of it being mentioned in the temple scroll, the Damascus document, the scroll of priestly courses, and the songs of Sabbath sacrifice. The solar year began on the day on which the heavenly luminaries were appointed, that is day 4, Wednesday, and was divided into consecutive quarters of fixed structure, 91 days divided into 13 weeks. The Sabbath fell on the same day of the week. You know, and knowing this, it's easy to see, you know, why they never moved it, even though they changed all the other Moedim and based them off of the month. That would have been too much for any one who had been following the way of Elohim, you know, because the Sabbath itself, the 7th-day Sabbath was the covenant. It was the sign of the covenant, you know, so they really couldn't move that, but they moved everything else, you know, because they based it off of the moon. And so this is why, now knowing this, we can see why the weekly Sabbath, you know, which is Saturday, by the way, you know, why it never changed. This is why it never changed. You know, and the other aspects did. You know, the festivals also fall on the same day of the month and in the same position within the quarter. No festival could ever fall on the Sabbath, and neither could the first day of any month, which is why they probably cut out the new moon. I mean, the new month feast, because when you're basing it off of a new moon, and sometimes it's going to fall on a Shabbat.
Right. Right.
And seeing that it's a new moon representing a new month, how can day 1 fall on day 7?
Yeah.
It doesn't add up, so they just eliminated it. The solar calendar was used to determine the cycles of service of the 24 priestly courses in 7-fold cycles of sabbatical years and jubilees. This calendar is believed to be ordained and written in the heavenly tablets and imprinted on the cyclic laws of nature. The calendar is divided into seasons and signs of the zodiac based on the underlying fourfold annual principle, which reflects the divine pattern of time. The 7 days of creation and the various 7-fold divisions derived as revealed in nature and priestly time as entrusted to humanity. The 7-fold solar year measuring time on the basis of a sacred principle, amalgamating the cosmic astronomical order in a ritual and liturgical order, was first learned from its guardians, the angels in heaven, by Enoch, the 7th from Adam, who, by the way, lived 365 years on earth prior to being taken. The same number of days in a year.
Yes, yes.
Showing that he is the authority on the calendar. He was the 7th from Adam. Showing the Shabbat, the covenant, the sign of the covenant to Elohim.
Wow.
Enoch in turn taught his descendants, the priests, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah, as we read in the books of Enoch. It was later relearned in Moshe's day, for he supposedly learned it on Mount Sinai. Moshe then imparted what he had learned to his brother Aaron and his sons, the priests, who then became the priestly guardians of the information. Within the Zadokite system, the temple days began in the morning at sunrise, and the night was counted after the day, characteristic of the solar year and calendar. So we did get that right. The day begins at sunrise. You know, it wasn't until they implemented a solar lunar-based calendar that they began to start the days in the evening. It's also interesting to note that according to the book of Enoch, Sariel, one of the leaders of the fallen angels that lusted after the daughters of men during the time mentioned in Genesis, is the one that specifically taught men about the lunar calendar. This is the origins of the lunar calendar. It came from Sariel, one of the head fallen angels. So, the creation calendar, what does it look like? Month 1. This is specifically for 2019, but it doesn't change. It really doesn't change very, very much. 4th day, which is a Wednesday, you know, was the start of the year on 3/20. And this was month 1, Rosh Hashanah. Month 2 began on 4/19. Yeah, and it was on day 6, which would have been a Friday. Month 3 will begin on 5/19, and it will be on the first day of the week, which is a Sunday. Month 4 will be on 6/19, and it will be on the 4th day, which is a Wednesday. Month 5 will be on 7/19, and it'll be on the 6th day, which is a Friday. Month 6 will be on 8/18, and it'll be on or first day, which is a Sunday. Month 7 is 9/18, and it'll be on the 4th day, which is a Wednesday. Month 8 will be on 10/18, and it'll be on the 6th day, which is a Friday. Month 9 will be on 11/17, and it'll be on the 1st day, which is a Sunday. Month 10 will be on 12/18, which will be on the 4th day, which is Wednesday. Month 11 will be on 1/17/2020, and it'll be on the 6th day, which is a Friday. Month 12 will be on 2/16, and it'll be on the 1st day, which is a Sunday. And if you look, you can see 4/6/1, 4/6/1, 4/6/1, 4/6/1. That's how Yah does things, in patterns. He does things in patterns. I'm always looking for patterns when I'm studying His Word, because that's how He does things. So what about the feast? Well, Rosh Hashanah, as I aforementioned, was the 4th day. Now, they also kept it as the beginning of the days of ordination. And these days of ordination spoke to when they would ordinate the temple, the temple at that time. It was the tabernacle. So these was the days of ordination for it. You know, now on 1/8, which was also a 4th day, you know, 1 week later, was the end of the days of ordination, which I found particularly interesting. And I'll tell you why shortly. Now, on 1/12, would be the start of the wave sheaf offerings. And the tabernacles is erected permanently for the year on this day. You know, so first they're ordaining all the aspects of the tabernacle, and then, you know, on day 12 is the day when it would actually be erected. You know, I'm sorry. Actually, the tabernacle is erected on 1/9, but 1/12 is the wave sheaf offering. You know, and you know, but it's interesting that they had these days of ordination, because if you liken that unto, you know, our flesh bodies as a tabernacle in the beginning of the year, you know, Yah, you know, wants you to start ordaining yourself unto Him.
Yeah.
And you know, in 1/9, you know, He wants you to be totally ordained unto Him. You know, and then 1/12, we start the wave sheaf offering. So you're giving Him thanks and praises, you know, for what He's giving you, you know, for that year, you know, to provide for you. And 1/13, which is the 2nd day, which would be a Monday, you know, that ends the first fruits offerings of barley. You know, so the wave sheaf begins on 1/12, ends on 1/13, and then of course 1/14 would have the Passover. On 1/15 begins the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it will always be on day 4, on a Wednesday. On 1/22 will be the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which will likewise always be on a Wednesday. Notice none of these things are falling on the Sabbath. On 2/14, they kept the second Passover. You know your scripture, you know, like for those who couldn't keep the first Passover, He allowed them to have a second Passover. You know, that second Passover, you know, would be next week in all actuality, you know, in accordance to the Zadokite calendar, May 2nd. You know, I don't know about you, but I'd like to keep it.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
You know, on 3-1, third month, day 1, start Shavuot first fruits of wheat. And I know Brother Kirk gonna be ecstatic about this one. On day 8 of the third month, in the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Weeks was an 8-day festival, or a week-long festival. You know, Kurt had been saying that for years. So I got to give it up to Elder Kurt. He was right on that one. They did originally keep it for a week. 4:19, first fruits of wine. And it would be on the first day. Notice all the ones with the first fruits are on the first day. 6-8, which would be 50 days later, would be first fruits of oil, and would also be on the first day. And 6-9 would be the beginning of the wood offering. They had a wood offering, you know, and people from the 12 tribes would bring the wood so that for it to be burned in for the altar, and so that they would have wood for the altar. You know, and so this began on 6-9, and it went for a week. So 6-15 would be the end of the wood offering, and it would be on the first day. 7-1 will of course be the Feast of Trumpets, which they also refer to as Remembrance Day, and it would be on a 4th day or Wednesday. The Day of Atonement, 7-10, and it would be on the 6th day, which would be a Friday. 7-15, of course, is the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles, and it would be on the 4th day. 7-22 would be the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, and again, it'll be on the 4th day. And then we have 7-23, which would be the 8th day of Solemn Assembly, the last great day. And it would be on the 5th day. You know, and, you know, again, you know, these are the words of Zadok, speaking from the grave, trying to put an end to this division in Yahshua's body concerning the calendar issue. You know, I pray that we can hearken unto it. You know, this is the calendar. This is what it looks like in 2019. This is what it looks like in 2020. This is what it looks like in 2021. This is what it looks like in 2022. This is what it looks like in 2042, 2082, year 3002, 3042. This is what it looks like, period. Hallelujah. This is what it looks like, you know, when Yahshua comes back.
Hallelujah.
Because it's written in the heavenly tablets.
Yes.
You know, so I shared with you when I first began this lesson that I felt like Ezekiel. In 2:3 through 3:1, it says, "And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that have rebelled against me. They and my fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. They are impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Adonai Yahuwah. And they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that there have been a prophet among them, and thou, son of man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with thee, though thou doest well among scorpions. Be not afraid of their words, nor dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. And thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth, eat that I give thee. And when I looked, behold, an hand was sent unto me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein. Father, I have eaten what you have given me. I have brought it before your people. And he spread it out before me, and it was written within and without, and there was written therein lamentations, mourning, and woe. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. I do believe I've been speaking to the house of Israel. Ezekiel 3:10 and 11. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, all my words that I shall say, speak unto thee, receive in thine heart, and hear with thine ears. Go and get thee to them of the captivity unto the children of the people, and speak unto them, and tell them, thus saith the Adonai, Yahuwah, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth, and give them warning from me. When I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. Yet if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul.
Hallelujah.
Again, when a righteous man doeth turn from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die because he has not given him warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteousness which he hath done shall not be remembered. But this blood will I require at thine hand.
Hallelujah.
Nevertheless, if thou warn the righteous man, that the righteous sin not, that he doeth not sin, he shall surely live, because he is warned. Also thou hast delivered thy soul. I have given you what Yah has given me.
Hallelujah.
I pray that you adhere to it. But either way, you've been warned. That's all I have for you.